Stay back! All he is, stay back!
The bikies defied the police. We were on the edge of anarchy, and that's why it was important that we had such an important statement.
The state government's crackdown on criminal motorcycle gangs has divided Queenslanders.
There's a very easy way forward for these criminal gang members. This is it. This is all I have to do. Leave the gangs.
Queensland police are pulling out an extraordinary new weapon in their crackdown on bikies.
Tip-offs from residents have helped police continue their harassment of outlaw motorcycle gangs.
The laws have also declared 26 clubs as criminal organisations, so just being a member is now a crime.
The state's anti-bikie legislation bans members of criminal bikie gangs from gathering in groups of 3 or more.
September 2013 was the tipping point in the war on outlaw motorcycle gangs. The scenes from the violent brawl in Broadbeach sending a shockwave across the country and prompting the toughest crackdown on bikies ever. Now, 10 years on, key players are opening up about the incident that fundamentally changed how Queensland and the country deals with outlaw motorcycle gangs. John Paul Langbrook is the member for Surfers Paradise and was part of the Newman government during the crackdown.
John Paul, it's Friday, September 27th, 2013, and you were out for dinner, I believe. Tell me what happened on the night.
Well, I'd actually been at Nobby's Ark, a couple of kilometres down south at Nobby's Beach, and came back in a taxi. I don't remember even if they had it walled off then. I don't think they did, because I just remember getting into a taxi and going home. It was Police Remembrance Day, so there'd been a number of significant ceremonies around the state, and it was the first night of school holidays, so I do remember that. But from the next morning, when the actual incident had unfolded, it then became a rolling drama.
It happened here at what was the Aura restaurant. Obviously, this is a seismic moment in politics and in law and order in Queensland.
Well, it was, because for some time we had been knowing that there were issues with bikies and gang involvement with a number of businesses in this precinct, from here through to Surfers Paradise. Now, subsequently, that's been proven to be the case. We've seen it with tattoo parlours and massage, but back then we'd had some significant discussions as government. We'd been the government for about 18 months. In the prior to coming to government, we were getting armed shootings at almost one a day. I had senior police telling me that there was that 70% of businesses in Broadbeach were being extorted. We had people with tow trucks seemingly or apparently being told, well, they can act with impunity, just pay a fine, just pay it when these people tell you you've been towed, even though there was no legal sign saying that they should. And massage and tattoo places were being burnt down at different times, and that's continued to happen as well. And at that time, the then Police Minister Neil Roberts and the Deputy Premier Paul Lucas said, no, there's no problem on the Gold Coast.
What made that night so significant for you and for the government in the sense of leading to the actions that came after that?
Well, because of the actions of the people who were involved, because we basically have a civil society in Western society, but especially in, say, Queensland, Australia, where back then we had about 10,000 police. So with 4.8 million citizens, a lot of us rely on the fact that people do the right thing. 10,000 police and 4.8 million citizens, if they decide to do the wrong thing, you're going to have anarchy. And our society relies on the fact that most people do the right thing. That night here at Aura, when the bikies defied the police and went to the Southport Watch House and demanded that the guy who'd been arrested be released, we were on the edge of anarchy, and that's why it was important that we had such an important statement. And that's where Campbell Newman, the Premier, subsequently, who was on an overseas trade mission, rang me the next day, on the Saturday, and the day after, so once from China, the next day from Japan, and said to me, we're going to fix this, which is subsequently what led to the VLAD legislation that Jared Blay brought in by the next sitting week.
And this is seen as a line in the sand moment of where the government wanted to stop this ever happening again.
Well, yes, because the incident was so amazing that what had happened was, if you talk to senior police who were there, I remember, as I recall, there was a quite diminutive, small female police officer who thought that she was going to die because the bikies were so, virulent in their anger.
On that night, when you saw the police here, did you have any sense of how seismic a moment this was?
No, I had no idea. And in fact, it came out later when the story was written, because remember, when it first happened, the bikies defiantly came out, actually, and I remember vividly a front page on the Gold Coast Bulletin with a bikie with his identity suppressed, but standing there in full colours going, we run this town. And that would have been a slap in the face for the government. I've heard from many people that I was in here that night, that I was hosting a fundraising dinner. And so that partly it was because of my involvement that this is why the crackdown happened, which was only good for my local reputation, but absolutely untrue.
Wait, search warrant! Police search warrant! Police search warrant! Raise your hands, mate.
If you ask the bikies, they'd call it harassment.
We should be free to see who we want to see, talk to who we want to talk to, spend time with who we want to spend time.
And for the cops tasked with cleaning up the criminal gangs, that was their intention.
Queensland Police are handpicking officers to head a task force to take on bikies.
Police say they will not be intimidated and that they're drawing the line here.
Witness unacceptable violent behaviour, particularly in the Gold Coast area.
Smashed apart the crime hub of an outlaw motorcycle gang.
Armed hold-ups were almost a nightly occurrence, but since the operation began 3 weeks ago, there hasn't been one.
The Vicious Lawless Association Disestablishment Act, VLAD, was labelled some of the harshest anti-bikie laws in the country, and the government at the time made no apologies.
Right now, we're trying to shut down gangs who manufacture drugs, who sell them to kids.
But it came with a lot of controversy.
Campbell Newman's all-consuming war on outlaw bikies.
Now the man who gave the police such extraordinary powers is breaking his silence.
What we had to do was, talk to the senior police, the commissioner, and say that, they had to deal with it. It was about reinforcing that they had political support to take action, which they really, frankly, shouldn't have needed to hear. But they had to be told that. They also had to be told they get the resources, but they also needed a fair bit of pressure on them because the night of the riot, there seemed to be this sort of what I call an inappropriate sort of relationship where sort of police on the coast were talking to the sergeant at arms of the group and saying, what are you doing, sort of thing. It's like, I'm sorry, I have a real problem with that. It's like, the idea that the police would engage in almost negotiations with people involved in a criminal enterprise, I just didn't think was appropriate. The other thing was the legislation, so-called VLAD legislation, and the person who actually came up with that was the then Solicitor General, Walter Sofronoff, and this is my recollection, that Jared Blay, who was the Attorney General, he had obviously spoken to soften off and sought his advice about legislation.
Your listeners should be able to go to a cafe at Broadbeach at night and not have 50 Bandidos show up with their patches on and drag people out and have a full-blown assault in the public, and then go to a police station and demand that those arrested be returned. Now, that was the line in the sand for the government.
I think it created a lot of noise in terms with the critics of the government. There's no doubt about that. And that's why I was reflecting a bit on the laws themselves. You know, I don't think, you know, if it had just been we're not going to have those laws, but we just went after the gangs themselves, I think it wouldn't have been, you know, there wouldn't have been the controversy.
They're a recreational group of former soldiers who share a love of motorcycles. Their clubhouse is now subject to new rules that ban outlaw gang members from wearing their colours.
Police resources were diverted to targeting gangs, leaving other crime, including the hunt for pedophiles, virtually ignored.
I've reflected on my view these days about those laws, but you know, I think there's more politics in the reaction. I'll tell you another reason why I don't like the laws. I think the laws were then misused by some police in the pursuit of this whole thing. And I still today go, well, why was that necessary?
We'll squash our clubs. We can't ride individually. We ride as a group to make money to serve the kids and support other things. And you can't do that if you're going to be out in a group of three and you're going to get all the attention.
I'm sorry that those people were impacted in that way. It wasn't the intent at all. I look with the hindsight, looking back on the whole thing, I just don't believe that it was necessary.
I need every available unit possible to this location, okay? Every available. We've got two sides, they're both about to go, it's clearly outnumbered.
Police were outnumbered, certainly in fear of themselves getting hurt.
Why has this occurred? They've got this viewpoint now that they don't need to worry about the police.
Two former senior police officers with very different views on the bikie war.
I said this needs strong legislation and an additional manpower that we simply don't have down there at the coast at the moment.
I wasn't a fan of the Vlad laws that were brought in. I thought they were ineffective, and the data shows that I think they achieved very little.
Jim Keogh led the police response following the Broadbeach Brawl.
They're there in colours, they're there in mass, they're there in strength, and they're there with violence. So to remove that was going to need something very substantial. When I was first asked would I go back down there, and I said no. And my rationale there was I don't want to go back and give political rhetoric to say, oh, we're on top of this, etc. And we're not on top of it at all. And certainly somebody's going to get killed. And there I would have looked quite stupid saying we're on top of it.
But with a commitment of stronger laws and an additional 100 officers, it didn't take long for Jim to hit the ground.
What we're actually discovering from Cairns to Coolangatta to Mount Isa was substantial. The Gold Coast obviously had become the crime capital of Queensland, if not Australia, for drugs, party drugs. And everybody wanted a piece of the action, everybody wanted a piece of the turf. There was the territorial warfare had already started. And so with Hells Angels coming down here to stamp their mark in the area of the Finks, the warfare had begun. And so simply an affront into Broadbeach by the Finks caused the Bandidos to react. The Finks control the security in and around Surfers Paradise in relation to the nightclub industry, but that was more of a facade to actually control the drug trade there. And that went on for a number of years. And here there was about to be some encroachment into this particular area. Look, they were certainly harsh laws, But the situation that was confronting not simply the police, but the community here on the Gold Coast was harsh. The Gold Coast image would have been tarnished and never recovered. Tourism, the tourism mecca for Australia, the Gold Coast, would have suffered immense and irreparable damage as a result of serious injury. So going forward with the legislation was in fact a no-brainer. It sent a message to the whole of Australia that this will remain a safe place and that the government will support the police, the government will support the community in maintaining it as a safe place.
You know, I think that's just driven them underground to a large extent. The number of bikie members in Australia is actually growing. My name's Terry Goldsworthy. I'm Associate Professor at Bond University, working in the criminal justice and criminology field. So my background is 28 years in the Queensland Police Service. They're one percenters, they call themselves one percenters, and literally in terms of crime, they are one percenters, and that's been borne out by 2 government inquiries where they looked at organised crime and bikies in particular, and they were less than 1%. So the point is there, if they're less than 1% of your drug trafficking offences, then who are the other 99%? And what are you doing about them? We go, well, you're targeting a person because of who that person is. You're not targeting the person because of what they're doing. And I think that's a lot of wasted resources, a lot of wasted time, that perhaps if they invested that time into focusing on those who are committing the high-level organised crime, then you're not going to worry about 2 guys, you know, as we've seen initially with the Vlad laws, etc., 2 broken down old bikies with their girlfriend out at a pub out west who, you know, would be flat out doing any organised crime activity, but the amount of time and effort and money put into that was simply phenomenal.